world had always been full of people who believed they were better than everyone else. Among them was a group that stood out not because of kindness or wisdom, but because they believed they were unbeatable. They had wealth, technology, and influence that others could only dream of. Their leaders often spoke loudly, boasting about how their knowledge, strength, and ideas made them superior to anyone else. They looked down on ordinary people, treating them like they were slow, weak, or incapable. It was as if the rest of humanity existed only to admire them or follow their rules. For years, their arrogance went unchallenged. People whispered quietly in the background, saying things like, "They think they can do anything," or "They don't understand what real life is like for the rest of us." But these words were ignored by those who believed themselves untouchable. They moved through life with confidence, often bordering on cruelty, because they were certain no one could stop them. Their mistakes were rare, their victories common, and their pride grew every day. They held exhibitions of their power and skill, showing off inventions, strategies, and accomplishments. Every achievement was a way to remind the world and themselves that they were at the top. In large halls filled with bright lights and cheering crowds, they would explain their plans to dominate every field: science, business, even everyday life. People watched and clapped, but many also felt uneasy. There was something cold and distant about their confidence, a sense that their victories meant someone else had to lose. Ordinary humans struggling with jobs, family, or simple survival often felt invisible, like they were nothing compared to this group. Yet, life has a way of quietly reminding people that no one is truly invincible. Among ordinary humans, there were always those who refused to bow down to arrogance. They didn't have fancy tools or endless resources. They didn't speak in public halls or make headlines, but they had something else: determination, creativity, and an unshakable belief that they could make a difference. These people worked quietly in their communities, solving small problems in clever ways, helping neighbors, inventing new solutions with limited means. Their efforts were often unnoticed at first, but slowly, the world began to see that ordinary people were capable of extraordinary things. In small towns and crowded cities, humans faced challenges that the boastful group could never understand. They dealt with real danger, with hunger, illness, and the uncertainty of life. Every day was a test of their resilience, and each challenge forced them to think differently. Where the arrogant group relied on their power and certainty, ordinary people relied on their minds and hearts. They shared knowledge with friends, strangers, and anyone willing to listen. They worked together to solve problems that seemed impossible. And although they were underestimated, their strength quietly grew. The boastful group often mocked these efforts. They would look at someone working hard to fix a problem and shake their heads, laughing at how long it took or how small the solution seemed. They didn't see the courage behind every small victory. They didn't see the countless nights spent worrying, planning, and hoping. They only saw what they believed was weakness. And this belief made them even more careless, even more convinced that no one could ever challenge them. But humans have a way of proving themselves when it matters most. The first signs were subtle. A local inventor created a device that solved a major problem in the community, something the boastful group had ignored because it seemed too small to matter. A group of neighbors came together to protect a natural area that powerful companies wanted to destroy. People started solving problems in ways that the arrogant leaders never anticipated. At first, it seemed minor, almost invisible, but it was the beginning of something bigger. The ordinary humans didn't do it for fame or recognition. They did it because they cared. They had no interest in showing superiority or boasting about their skills. Their motivation was simple. They wanted to survive, to thrive, and to protect the people and places they loved. And in their humility, they found a power that the arrogant group could never understand. As time passed, more examples emerged. Communities began working together in ways that the boastful group had never imagined. People shared resources, knowledge, and strategies. They discovered that when individuals combine their efforts, they can achieve results far beyond what any single person could do. This realization began to spread quietly, like a hidden ripple moving through society. And with each success, the ordinary humans became stronger, more confident, and more capable of facing challenges that once seemed impossible. Meanwhile, the boastful group continued their public displays of power. They built bigger machines, held grander events, and made even louder speeches about their superiority. They laughed at ordinary humans, believing them incapable of any meaningful impact. But the more they focused on showing off, the more disconnected they became from reality. They failed to notice the small changes happening around them. They didn't understand that strength does not only come from machines, money, or status. Strength can also come from courage, persistence, and a refusal to give up. The story of Part 1 is not about dramatic battles or world-changing events. It's about the quiet tension between arrogance and humility, between boasting and persistence. It's about a group that believed they were untouchable and ordinary humans who refused to accept that belief. In this world, humans learned to rely on each other, to value courage over confidence, and to understand that true power often grows in the shadows, unnoticed until the right moment. By the end of this part, the stage is set. The arrogant group remains unaware of the strength building around them. They continue to boast, to underestimate, and to believe that their superiority is unchallenged. Yet, ordinary humans are preparing, learning, and quietly gaining the skills and courage that will eventually allow them to show the world what true power really feels like. The story has begun not with a clash, but with a quiet warning. Those who boast too loudly may not see the strength growing in those they underestimate, even in the simplest acts: helping a neighbor, solving a problem, speaking up when it matters. Humans were proving that courage and intelligence could be more powerful than arrogance and pride. And though the boastful group laughed, ridiculed, and ignored them, the seeds of change were already planted. In these early days, the world seemed calm, but beneath the surface, ordinary humans were building something unstoppable. They didn't know it yet, and the arrogant group certainly had no idea, but a shift was coming. The arrogance of the powerful would soon meet the resilience of ordinary people, and when it did, the world would witness a force that no amount of boasting could contain. A force built not on pride, but on courage, persistence, and the simple but profound strength of being human. Even though the boastful group remained confident and full of pride, the ordinary humans who had been quietly building strength began to show the first signs of resistance. These signs were not loud or dramatic at first. There were no grand speeches, no huge inventions to announce to the world. Instead, the resistance grew in small, clever, and unexpected ways that the arrogant group never paid attention to. In towns and cities, people noticed small problems that the powerful had ignored. Roads that were broken, water systems that failed, schools that lacked supplies, and hospitals that struggled with medicine. These were problems that seemed impossible to solve without vast resources. But ordinary humans didn't wait for the boastful group to intervene. They rolled up their sleeves, shared their ideas, and found ways to make things better with what they had. At first, it was simple fixes. A group of neighbors repaired a broken water pipe, using materials they found locally. In another town, people organized a small library to ensure children could access books and learn, even when schools could not provide enough. Each act seemed minor, but it had a ripple effect. Others saw what was being done and felt inspired to take action in their own communities. People realized that even without power, money, or influence, they could make a difference. The arrogant group, of course, laughed at these efforts. They considered them pointless, believing that only grand actions backed by wealth and technology mattered. "Why waste time on such small things?" they would say in their speeches. "These people are trying, but they will never catch up to us." And yet every small success built confidence among ordinary humans. Every solution they found, no matter how small, was proof that their creativity, determination, and collaboration could achieve results the boastful group could not even imagine. What the powerful didn't realize was that these small victories were teaching humans important lessons. They learned how to organize, how to work together, and how to face challenges without giving up. They discovered that true power doesn't always come from technology, money, or loud declarations. It often comes from patience, ingenuity, and the courage to keep trying even when the odds are against you. And with each new challenge they solved, their belief in themselves grew stronger. Communities started to share their ideas with one another. People wrote down their methods for solving problems, shared instructions for building useful tools, and exchanged advice about how to survive difficult situations. This sharing created a network of knowledge and support that the boastful group did not notice. They were too focused on their own achievements and their own superiority to see that ordinary, Humans were quietly becoming stronger together. One particularly striking example came from a remote village that had long been ignored by powerful authorities. The villagers were facing frequent power outages which affected their ability to work, study, and stay safe. While the boastful group focused on building larger and more advanced energy systems for cities and wealthy regions, the villagers came together and built a small, simple system that used renewable energy from the sun and local resources. It wasn't perfect and it couldn't power a whole city, but it worked. It allowed them to live more comfortably and safely, and it inspired neighboring villages to try similar solutions. This was when the first whispers of real resistance began. People started noticing that ordinary humans could solve problems faster, cheaper, and often more effectively than the boastful group could, even with their superior resources. Stories spread about clever solutions, acts of bravery, and innovative thinking. These stories were passed from person to person, inspiring more people to take action. What began as small acts of defiance slowly became a movement, though it was still quiet and almost invisible to the arrogant leaders. Humans also started using their creativity in unexpected ways to challenge the arrogance of the powerful. In one city, a group of ordinary workers found a way to improve the traffic system using simple maps and calculations, reducing congestion that had caused delays for years. In another area, families created community gardens to solve food shortages, ensuring that even in hard times no one went hungry. Each act may have seemed small, but combined, they showed that humans could solve problems without needing to rely on the boastful group. It wasn't just about solving problems. Ordinary humans also began standing up to unfair treatment. When the arrogant group tried to impose rules that favored themselves at the expense of others, people resisted calmly, but firmly. They wrote letters, held meetings, and peacefully protested decisions that were unfair or harmful. They discovered that courage and unity could challenge arrogance in ways that the boastful group had never anticipated. Of the most important things humans learned during this time was how to turn obstacles into opportunities. Every challenge the arrogant group ignored, every difficulty left unaddressed became a chance for ordinary people to show their strength. A broken bridge became a way for communities to work together to rebuild it. A failing school became a chance for neighbors to tutor children and create after-school programs. Every problem solved was a quiet act of resistance, a proof that the human spirit was more powerful than the pride of the boastful group. Even as humans worked quietly, the arrogant group continued to boast. They held conferences to show off new technology and strategies, confident that the world was still under their control. They ignored the growing network of ordinary humans, thinking it was too weak, too slow, or too insignificant to matter. They did not realize that power is not just about what you own or display. It is also about what you can achieve with heart, mind, and community. By the end of Part 2, it was clear that something important was happening. Ordinary humans were no longer passive observers in a world dominated by arrogance. They were becoming active participants, quietly challenging the notion that superiority guaranteed control. Every small victory, every act of courage, and every clever solution added to their strength. It was a slow process, almost invisible to the boastful group, but it was unstoppable. The story at this point is not yet about a dramatic confrontation, but about preparation and growth. Ordinary humans were learning the power of unity, persistence, and ingenuity. They were discovering that even without advanced tools or endless resources, they could create change. And though the boastful group continued to laugh, mock, and underestimate them, the seeds of resistance had already been planted. People were beginning to understand that true power is not just about being strong, loud, or wealthy. True power comes from patience, creativity, collaboration, and the courage to act when no one else is looking. It comes from believing in yourself and the people around you, even when the odds are against you. And as these lessons spread quietly across communities, the boastful group remained blind to the growing movement that would soon challenge their arrogance in ways they could never imagine. The first signs of resistance were small but significant. Communities repaired what was broken, helped each other survive, and discovered innovative solutions to everyday problems. Humans began to understand that even ordinary people could do extraordinary things. They didn't need recognition, fame, or approval from the arrogant group. They needed only courage, determination, and the willingness to work together. This quiet awakening was the foundation of something much larger. Ordinary humans were slowly discovering their own strength, and they were learning that when people unite for a common purpose, their combined power can challenge even the most boastful and arrogant leaders. The world had not yet seen the full potential of this resistance, but the first signs were undeniable. Change was coming, and it was coming from the very people the arrogant group had dismissed as insignificant. By the end of this part, the audience can see that ordinary humans are no longer just surviving. They are preparing to challenge the arrogance around them. They are learning, adapting, and quietly proving that no amount of boasting or superiority can stop the courage, intelligence, and determination of people who refuse to give up. The stage is set for the next chapter, where the subtle power of ordinary humans will grow even stronger, and the arrogant group will begin to realize that their dominance is not as unshakable as they once believed. By now, the ordinary humans had grown stronger. The small victories they had achieved quietly were beginning to add up. People across towns, cities, and villages started to notice that their efforts were making a difference. The once invisible acts of resistance had begun to ripple through society, and the boastful group was about to face the first signs of true challenge. It began with unexpected successes. One community, facing repeated failures with a local energy system, managed to create a simple but effective solution using recycled materials and natural resources. They could now power essential equipment, light homes, and keep families safe at night. The arrogant group, who had believed no one could accomplish such a thing without advanced technology and huge budgets, were stunned when they learned about it. They had dismissed the humans' ingenuity as impossible, yet here it was, a working system built entirely by ordinary people. This moment marked the beginning of humbling encounters. The boastful group realized that their assumptions about human weakness were wrong. They had been so sure that intelligence, technology, and power alone guaranteed superiority. They had laughed at humans who struggled daily with ordinary problems. But now the humans were demonstrating that creativity, determination, and teamwork could achieve what the powerful could not. One remarkable example involved a region affected by severe flooding. The boastful group had the resources to respond but was slow to act, treating the disaster as a minor inconvenience. Meanwhile, local people organized themselves immediately. They formed rescue teams, built temporary shelters, and redirected water to prevent further damage. They did it without waiting for permission or resources from the powerful. And when the authorities finally arrived, they found that the humans had already saved countless lives and minimized destruction. The arrogance of the group was shaken. They had expected chaos, not efficiency, not resilience, not courage. In another instance, humans faced challenges in communication. Remote communities had been isolated because the boastful group had invested in technology for profit, not access. Instead of waiting for the powerful to act, humans built their own network of messengers, signal systems, and shared information across regions. Their system was simple, yet effective, and it allowed communities to cooperate in ways that the arrogant group had thought impossible. What the powerful considered primitive solutions turned out to be faster, more reliable, and more adaptable than their advanced systems. These encounters forced the boastful group to confront a reality they had never imagined. They could no longer dismiss ordinary humans as weak or incapable. They began to feel a sense of unease and frustration. Every time they tried to assert dominance, humans found ways to outthink them, to adapt, and to solve problems in ways that the powerful had overlooked. The arrogance that had once blinded them now began to falter. It wasn't just practical solutions that surprised the boastful group. It was the human spirit. In a world where resources were limited and life was often harsh, ordinary people still showed kindness, empathy, and courage. They risked their safety to help neighbors. They shared knowledge with strangers, and they worked together without expecting reward. This moral strength, combined with intelligence and persistence, was something the boastful group had never accounted for. It was a kind of power that could not be bought or programmed, a force that came from the heart as much as the mind. One of the most powerful, humbling moments came during a public demonstration. The arrogant group had organized an event to showcase their technological superiority. They expected to impress the world and reinforce their dominance. But the humans, working quietly behind the scenes, created a solution to a problem that the boastful group had claimed was unsolvable. When the humans revealed their achievement, the audience was amazed. The powerful leaders were visibly shocked, unable to understand how ordinary people had accomplished something they themselves had struggled to achieve. It was a moment of truth, the first clear evidence that boasting did not equal superiority. This pattern continued. Humans began to anticipate challenges and find solutions before the arrogant group even realized there was a problem. They adapted to changes quickly, learned from failures, and encouraged one another. They worked in ways that were flexible, creative, and cooperative, while the boastful group relied on rigid rules, hierarchies, and overconfidence. The contrast became more obvious every day, and the once unquestioned dominance of the powerful began to crack. What made these encounters truly humbling for the arrogant group was the human ability to think beyond logic and structure. Humans could see connections others overlooked, combine resources in unusual ways, and come up with solutions that seemed impossible. Their creativity was unpredictable, their resilience unmeasurable, and their courage unstoppable. No amount of boasting or superiority could protect the powerful from the ingenuity and determination of people who refused to accept their limitations. These humbling encounters also taught an important lesson about perception. The boastful group had relied on appearances, public recognition, and the idea that strength comes from visibility. But the humans were demonstrating that true power often works quietly, out of sight, and grows in the shadows. It was a lesson that the arrogant leaders were slow to learn. They were used to dominating through force, wealth, or status, and they had never faced opponents who relied on intelligence, cooperation, and moral courage. Through all of this, humans remained humble. They did not boast about their successes, and they did not seek recognition from the arrogant group. Their focus was on solving problems, helping others, and learning from every experience. This humility became a source of strength, because it allowed them to continue growing without distraction or ego. Meanwhile, the boastful group became more defensive, frustrated and increasingly aware that their superiority was being challenged in ways they could not easily counter. Another striking example occurred when a group of humans faced a severe shortage of medical supplies in a region where the powerful group had long claimed control. Instead of waiting for help, the humans organized local production of essential medicines using knowledge passed down through generations. They shared these resources with neighboring communities and trained people in basic medical care. By the time the boastful group intervened, humans had already saved countless lives. This was a clear demonstration that resourcefulness, courage, and collaboration could outperform raw power and wealth. Even in education and learning, humans began to surpass expectations. Where the boastful group controlled schools, access to knowledge was limited and structured in ways that benefited the powerful. Ordinary people, however, created informal learning circles, mentorship programs, and knowledge-sharing communities. Children and adults alike learned faster and more effectively than in the traditional systems set up by the arrogant group. The humans' ability to adapt, teach, and learn was humbling, showing that intelligence cannot be confined by hierarchy or status. By the end of these humbling encounters, the arrogant group could no longer ignore the rising power of ordinary humans. Their arrogance was cracking, their confidence shaken, and their assumptions challenged. They had boasted of superiority for years, but now they were facing the undeniable truth. Humans were capable of extraordinary achievements, even without wealth, status, or advanced tools. These encounters marked a turning point. The humans were no longer invisible, and their quiet efforts had begun to demand attention. They had proven that true power is not about boasting or control. It is about courage, ingenuity, collaboration, and the will to act when others do not. Each small victory, each clever solution, and each act of kindness was a strike against arrogance and a reminder that the human spirit is stronger than anyone can anticipate. Part 3 shows that the boastful group's supremacy was not unshakable. They had underestimated ordinary humans for too long, and now reality was forcing them to confront their misjudgment. These encounters were not just about practical achievements, they were about proving that confidence without humility is fragile, and that genuine strength comes from resilience, intelligence, and unity. As this part closes, the audience can clearly see the rising power of humans. They have learned to solve problems creatively, to help one another, and to act decisively in the face of challenges. Meanwhile, the arrogant group is facing the first real cracks in their armor. They are starting to understand that boasting does not equal power. and that underestimating ordinary people is a mistake that can have serious consequences. Humans have begun to teach the world an important lesson. True power is not given. It is earned through courage, cooperation, and perseverance. And though the story is still far from over, it is clear that a shift is happening. A shift that will challenge arrogance and reveal the incredible potential of ordinary people working together toward a common goal. After the first humbling encounters, humans began to understand a powerful truth. They were stronger together than they were alone. For years, they had worked quietly, solving problems in their own communities, sharing ideas with neighbors, and helping each other survive. But now, the successes were beginning to reveal that there was potential for something even greater. A unified effort, where humans could combine their strengths to achieve goals far beyond what any individual could manage. People started reaching out across towns and villages, forming networks of cooperation. It began simply with shared knowledge. One village that had solved a water problem taught a neighboring village their method. Another group that had developed a small renewable energy system showed others how to replicate it using local materials. Slowly but surely, humans began to see that when they worked together, their power multiplied. Every lesson learned in one place could be applied elsewhere, and every success inspired others to act. The process of uniting was not always easy. People had different opinions, priorities, and methods. There were disagreements and debates about the best way to proceed. But through discussion, compromise, and shared goals, they discovered something important. Unity does not mean uniformity. Humans could maintain their individuality while working together, and in that balance they found strength. The boastful group, who believed strength came from control and dominance, could not understand this. They had assumed that unity required hierarchy or power, but humans showed that it could come from cooperation and mutual respect. One striking example of this new unity occurred when a large region faced a severe drought. Individual efforts had managed to save some crops and water, but the problem was too widespread for any single community to handle alone. Humans came together across the region, sharing water, seeds, and strategies. They organized teams to dig wells, build reservoirs, and implement irrigation systems that no single village could have accomplished by itself. Within weeks, they had saved much of the harvest and prevented starvation. The arrogant group watched in disbelief, unable to grasp how ordinary people, working without advanced technology or wealth, had solved a problem they themselves had considered overwhelming. Humans also began to realize the importance of planning and strategy. They no longer reacted only to problems, they anticipated them. By sharing information, observing patterns, and learning from mistakes, they developed methods to prevent issues before they became crises. They planned responses for natural disasters, shortages, and conflicts, creating systems that relied on cooperation rather than control. This proactive approach was something the boastful group had never expected. They were used to relying on power and authority to solve problems. But humans had discovered that preparation, collaboration, and foresight could achieve far more than dominance ever could. Education and knowledge sharing became central to this unity. Humans understood that the strength of the group depended on the knowledge of each individual. Communities organized informal schools, training sessions, and workshops. People taught one another everything from basic skills to advanced problem-solving techniques. Those who had learned something valuable in one area shared it with others, ensuring that knowledge spread quickly. The boastful group, who believed that intelligence and innovation were confined to a privileged few, began to see that ordinary humans could outthink and outperform even the most educated and well-resourced elites. Trust and empathy played a major role in this unity. Humans learned to rely on one another, to share resources without fear, and to help without expecting personal gain. They realized that when people work for a common purpose, individual sacrifices become less daunting. A family might share food with another family in need, knowing that when they face difficulty, help will come in return. This sense of mutual support created bonds stronger than any authority or hierarchy. The arrogant group had always assumed that power could only be maintained through fear or control, but humans were showing that voluntary cooperation, built on trust and compassion, could create a far more resilient system. Communication became a powerful tool in this process. Humans established networks for sharing news, resources, and advice. They used everything from simple word of mouth to makeshift communication systems. When one community discovered an effective solution to a problem, It spread quickly, allowing other groups to implement it before the issue became critical. The boastful group, focused on their own grand projects, overlooked this simple but effective method of coordination. They had assumed that complexity and technology alone defined success. But humans proved that intelligence combined with cooperation could achieve remarkable results with minimal resources. Unity also encouraged creativity and innovation. When humans faced a challenge collectively, they could pool ideas and experiment with solutions that no single person could develop alone. Problems that seemed unsolvable when approached individually became manageable when tackled by a group. For example, in one city suffering from pollution, humans formed teams to clean streets, plant trees, and educate the population on sustainable practices. The efforts multiplied as more communities joined, eventually transforming the environment in ways that the boastful group had considered impossible. The process of uniting did more than solve practical problems. It changed humans themselves. People began to see their own potential more clearly. They discovered that when they worked with others, their ideas mattered. Their actions could create change, and their courage could inspire others. Confidence grew, not from arrogance, but from knowing that they could rely on each other and accomplish things that once seemed impossible. The boastful group, who had assumed humans were weak, slow, or incapable, were now beginning to realize that the underestimated population had a strength far beyond what they had imagined. Unity also became a form of quiet resistance. Humans did not need to attack or confront the boastful group directly. By working together, solving problems, and achieving success, they challenged the assumption that superiority was guaranteed by wealth, status, or technology. Every coordinated effort, every collaborative achievement was a reminder that humans could thrive without relying on the arrogance of others. This subtle but powerful demonstration of capability frustrated the boastful group, who were used to having every challenge bow to their dominance. As humans united, they began to plan for larger challenges. They created strategies not just for solving immediate problems, but for long-term resilience. They thought about ways to protect their communities, share resources more effectively, and teach future generations to continue the work. This forward-thinking approach meant that every action had multiple benefits: improving daily life, strengthening cooperation, and preparing for the moment when their efforts would be tested on a larger stage. One of the most significant aspects of this unity was its inclusiveness. Everyone had a role to play regardless of age, skill, or background. Children helped by learning and sharing knowledge. Adults contributed labor and expertise, and elders provided wisdom and guidance. Every individual was valued, and every contribution mattered. This sense of inclusion strengthened the bonds between people and ensured that the movement was resilient. The boastful group, accustomed to centralized authority and exclusive power, could not comprehend a system where everyone's participation increased strength instead of creating division. By the end of this period, humans were no longer isolated problem solvers. They were a connected, cooperative force. They had learned that challenges were opportunities for collaboration, that trust and empathy multiplied strength, and that unity could create solutions far beyond what any single person or elite group could achieve. The boastful group was beginning to notice, but it was too late to dismiss the rising power of ordinary humans. This unity set the stage for the next phase of the story. Humans were ready to take on even greater challenges, to show the world that arrogance and superiority could be confronted with cooperation, creativity, and courage. The lessons they had learned, trust, planning, communication, and empathy, were becoming the foundation of a force that would soon demonstrate the true meaning of power. Part 4 shows that humans had moved beyond individual acts of resistance. They had discovered that working together, sharing knowledge, and supporting one another created strength far greater than anything the boastful group had anticipated. This unity was not loud or aggressive, but it was far more powerful than arrogance, and it prepared the humans to face the moment when their capabilities would truly be tested. Humans had begun to understand that real strength comes from connection, purpose, and the courage to act, even when the world seems to favor the arrogant. They had learned that unity does not erase individuality, but it amplifies it, and with every new connection, every shared idea, and every collaborative achievement, they were quietly preparing to show the world, and the boastful group, what true power really looks like. The moment of truth had finally arrived. After years of quietly building strength, learning, and working together, ordinary humans were ready to face the boastful group directly. They did not do this out of anger or desire for revenge. Their goal was far simpler and stronger: to show that determination, intelligence, and unity could overcome arrogance and false superiority. What had once been small victories and quiet resistance was now becoming a larger movement, capable of challenging even the most confident leaders. It began with a situation that demanded immediate action. The boastful group had made a major decision that threatened communities across several regions. Their plans were ambitious, designed to demonstrate their power and reinforce their belief in their own superiority. But humans, having anticipated the consequences, were already prepared. They had organized teams, shared information across networks, and developed strategies that the powerful had never considered. As the arrogant group implemented their plan, humans acted swiftly. Communities worked together to prevent harm, protect resources, and support those in danger. They were precise, coordinated, and intelligent in their actions. Each step was carefully planned, yet flexible enough to adapt to unexpected challenges. The boastful group watched, stunned, as ordinary people executed solutions that were not only effective but efficient. What they had expected to be chaos and confusion turned into order and success, and it became painfully clear that the humans were capable of far more than they had imagined. One particularly striking example occurred in a town facing a major industrial problem. The boastful group had designed a system that would maximize their control over resources, believing that ordinary people would simply comply. Instead, humans analyzed the situation, discovered flaws in the system, and created solutions that mitigated the impact. They repaired critical infrastructure, redistributed essential supplies, and communicated with neighboring areas to ensure that everyone was prepared. When the powerful group arrived to oversee the results, they were met not with helplessness or surrender, but with calm, organized, and effective action. The arrogance of the group was shaken. They had underestimated the humans' ability to think, plan, and act under pressure. In another instance, humans faced a threat that could have caused panic and despair. The boastful group had intended to enforce rules that would limit access to essential resources, expecting compliance and fear. But humans had already anticipated such moves. Communities had developed local alternatives, shared knowledge on resource management, and trained people to adapt quickly. When the group attempted to assert control, they discovered that humans had effectively neutralized the threat without confrontation. It was a moment that demonstrated the power of preparation, cooperation, and intelligence over dominance and intimidation. These encounters marked a turning point. Humans were no longer reacting defensively. They were taking initiative. They were proving that their collective strength could challenge arrogance directly, not through force but through planning, resilience, and creativity. Every act of problem-solving, every coordinated effort, became a clear statement. True power lies not in boasting or control but in courage, unity, and the willingness to act. The humans' approach was both strategic and moral. They did not seek to humiliate or punish the boastful group. They sought to solve problems, protect their communities, and demonstrate that false superiority could be challenged by genuine ability. This approach made their power even more impressive. The boastful group had relied on fear, status, and displays of strength, but humans were proving that ethical action combined with intelligence and cooperation could achieve far greater results. In one region, a natural disaster provided a dramatic demonstration of human capability. The boastful group had claimed that only their advanced technology and resources could handle such events. Yet humans, using their networks of knowledge and collaboration, managed to organize rescue operations, distribute resources efficiently, and prevent widespread suffering. Their success was not based on sophisticated machinery or wealth, but on preparation, teamwork, and determination. When the powerful arrived to oversee the disaster response, they were forced to acknowledge that the humans had not only coped, but excelled. Humans also began to influence public perception. Their successes were visible, their solutions effective, and their coordination impressive. People began to realize that the boastful group's claims of superiority were exaggerated. Communities that had once felt powerless now felt capable and confident. They saw that their efforts, when combined with those of others, could challenge even the most arrogant leaders. This shift in confidence further strengthened the movement, creating a cycle of empowerment that the powerful could not easily break. An important factor in this turning point was the humans' ability to remain calm under pressure. The boastful group often relied on intimidation, expecting fear and compliance from others. Humans, however, acted decisively without panic. They communicated clearly, distributed responsibilities, and adapted to unexpected problems. This composure not only enhanced their effectiveness, but also highlighted the contrast between genuine competence and false confidence. The more the boastful group tried to assert dominance, the more their lack of understanding of human resilience became apparent. Another striking element was the humans' use of creativity to overcome limitations. Where the boastful group relied on expensive technology, humans used simple but innovative methods. They combined resources, modified tools, and invented solutions on the spot. In many cases, their simplicity made their systems more effective than the complex mechanisms of the powerful group. This ingenuity reinforced a lesson that would become central to the story. Real strength often comes from adaptability, intelligence, and collaboration rather than status, wealth, or technology. Humans also began to demonstrate leadership at every level. Ordinary people, previously overlooked or underestimated, emerged as leaders within their communities. They coordinated efforts, inspired others, and shared knowledge freely. Leadership was not imposed from above, but arose naturally from ability, commitment, and trust. This decentralized system of leadership was far more resilient than the rigid hierarchies of the boastful group, allowing humans to respond quickly and effectively to challenges. By the end of these turning point encounters, the balance of power was shifting. The boastful group could no longer assume that their superiority guaranteed control. Humans had demonstrated that preparation, intelligence, courage, and collaboration could not only match but surpass arrogance and overconfidence. Every small act of resistance, every coordinated effort, had contributed to a growing realization. The humans who were once dismissed as ordinary were now proving themselves extraordinary. This period also highlighted an important moral lesson. Power without humility and understanding is fragile. The boastful group had relied on their status, resources, and loud declarations of superiority. They had ignored the human capacity for creativity, courage, and cooperation. By contrast, humans demonstrated that strength grounded in preparation, collaboration, and ethical action could achieve lasting impact. This lesson would resonate far beyond the immediate confrontation, shaping how people perceived true power. Part 5 shows that humans had moved from quiet resistance to active, strategic action. They were no longer reacting defensively. They were demonstrating initiative and capability on a large scale. Their successes challenged arrogance directly and proved that true power lies not in wealth, status, or force, but in courage, unity, intelligence, and the willingness to act decisively in the face of challenges. As the humans continued to act strategically and with determination, the boastful group began to recognize that their dominance was no longer guaranteed. They had underestimated ordinary people for too long, and now the consequences of that underestimation were becoming undeniable. Humans were not only capable of surviving, they were capable of thriving, innovating, and leading. By the end of Part 5, the story reaches a climactic stage. Humans have demonstrated their power, resilience, and intelligence. The boastful group, once untouchable, has been humbled not through confrontation or force, but through the quiet, determined actions of ordinary people working together. The stage is set for the final chapter, where lessons about true strength, humility, and unity will be fully revealed, and humanity will show what real power feels like. After years of quiet preparation, small victories, and coordinated efforts, humanity had reached the moment where their true strength could no longer be ignored. The boastful group, which had once claimed superiority over everyone else, was finally facing the undeniable truth. Ordinary humans, united and determined, could achieve extraordinary things. This final chapter was not just about proving a point. It was about showing what true power really feels like. And it was a lesson the world would never forget. The turning point had left the arrogant leaders shaken. They had expected resistance, perhaps, but they had never anticipated the intelligence, resourcefulness, and courage of ordinary people. Every plan they had made to assert dominance had been met with creativity and resilience. Their displays of power, which once awed the world, now seemed fragile in comparison to the quiet, steady force of human determination. People who had once been considered powerless were now leading, innovating, and inspiring others to act. Communities across regions came together to reinforce what they had learned. The lessons from previous victories were shared widely, creating systems that were efficient, adaptable, and cooperative. People no longer acted in isolation. They worked as part of a larger network, supporting each other and learning from every experience. When challenges arose, they did not panic or wait for someone to take charge. They acted immediately, guided by shared knowledge, trust, and mutual support. This ability to respond quickly and effectively became their greatest strength. One of the most remarkable aspects of humanity's rise was the ability to transform challenges into opportunities. Natural disasters, resource shortages, and social conflicts became situations where humans could demonstrate their creativity and resilience. When a flood threatened several villages, humans organized rescue teams, built barriers, and redistributed resources so that no one went hungry or unsafe. When a city faced energy shortages, people developed small, efficient power systems using locally available materials. Every problem solved was not just a practical success. It was proof that humans could overcome limitations with intelligence, collaboration, and courage. The boastful group, watching all of this unfold, struggled to maintain their composure. They had relied on intimidation, wealth, and advanced technology to assert control. But it had become clear that these tools alone were not enough. Humans had shown that true strength comes from within, from the ability to think creatively, to act ethically, and to support one another. Every act of cooperation, every clever solution, and every demonstration of courage highlighted the limits of arrogance and the enduring power of human resilience. In addition to practical achievements, humans demonstrated moral and emotional strength. They helped not just their own communities but also those who were far away or in different circumstances. Acts of kindness, empathy, and solidarity multiplied their impact. Where the boastful group had used fear and superiority to control, humans used trust and collaboration to grow stronger together. This moral dimension made their power unique and undeniable. People around them began to notice, respect, and follow their example, further increasing their collective influence. Education and knowledge sharing played a crucial role in this final stage. People who had learned solutions to challenges taught others. Communities shared strategies, skills, and lessons from experience. Young people were trained not only in practical skills, but also in teamwork, planning, and ethical decision-making. By spreading knowledge widely, humans ensured that their progress was sustainable. The boastful group had believed that intelligence could be confined to the privileged. But ordinary people proved that learning and wisdom could grow anywhere, given the right environment and cooperation. The moment of confrontation, though not violent, was powerful. Humans no longer waited for permission or approval. They acted decisively, using everything they had learned. They implemented solutions to large-scale problems faster, smarter, and more efficiently than the boastful group could manage. They were organized yet flexible, strategic yet compassionate, proving that true power is not about dominance but about capability, resilience, and ethical action. Every successful initiative was a quiet but undeniable challenge to arrogance. One striking example involved a major supply crisis that the boastful group had tried to control. They had expected to manipulate resources to demonstrate their power, but humans had already devised a plan. Communities coordinated distribution, produced alternatives using local materials, and communicated effectively across regions. When the powerful tried to intervene, they discovered that humans had already solved the crisis. Their pride was bruised, and the arrogance that had guided their actions began to crumble. Ordinary people had achieved what they had believed impossible. This final phase also highlighted the role of leadership within humanity. Unlike the boastful group, leadership among humans was not about titles, authority, or control. Leaders emerged based on ability, trust, and commitment. They guided, inspired, and coordinated, ensuring that every individual's skills were used effectively. This decentralized leadership made humans adaptable, resilient, and capable of responding to any challenge. The boastful group, accustomed to rigid hierarchies, could not understand a system where leadership was flexible and competence-based, rather than imposed. Humanity's victory was not loud or violent, it was evident through results. Communities flourished, problems were solved, and collective confidence grew. People who had once felt powerless discovered that their intelligence, courage, and cooperation could shape outcomes in ways that were once unimaginable. The boastful group, which had relied on intimidation and status, found that their methods were no match for humans united by trust, creativity, and ethical purpose. By the end of this final stage, it was clear that a new understanding of power had emerged. True strength is not measured by wealth, technology, or the ability to control others. It is measured by courage, cooperation, intelligence, resilience, and the ability to act decisively in the face of challenges. Humans had demonstrated all of these qualities, proving that arrogance and superiority are fragile when confronted with determination, ingenuity, and unity. The story of humanity's rise sent a powerful message to the world. Ordinary people, when united and determined, can accomplish extraordinary feats. They can challenge false superiority, overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles, and achieve lasting change. The boastful group, once confident in their invincibility, had learned the hard way that real power cannot be claimed. It must be earned through action, ethics, and collaboration. Humans celebrated not with pride or boasting, but with quiet satisfaction. They had proven that courage and cooperation could achieve what arrogance could not. Their efforts had improved lives, strengthened communities, and inspired future generations. They had shown that true power is shared, inclusive, and ethical. By working together, they had created a force that could not be ignored, and they had done it without relying on intimidation or status. In the aftermath, the world began to change. People everywhere started to recognize the value of collaboration, empathy, and perseverance. Communities invested in learning, sharing knowledge, and supporting one another. Leadership became more decentralized, decisions were made with input from those affected, and solutions focused on practical outcomes rather than appearances. Humanity had learned that strength grows where people work together, and that arrogance and boasting are never enough to maintain control. This final chapter of the story shows that humanity's greatest victory was not just in solving problems or challenging the boastful group, it was in revealing the true meaning of power. Power is not about status or wealth. It is about courage, resilience, intelligence, cooperation, and the willingness to act. Humans had proven that even those considered ordinary are capable of extraordinary achievements when they unite and work with purpose. By the end of the story, the boastful group had been humbled, not through force or punishment, but through the undeniable capability of ordinary people. Humanity had shown that determination, collaboration, and ethical action could overcome arrogance, reshape communities, and inspire the world. The lesson was clear. Never underestimate the potential of humans when they act together. Guided by courage, intelligence, and integrity, humans had started quietly, with small victories and acts of kindness. They had grown through learning, collaboration, and courage. Now they had reached their full potential, showing that true power is built not on boasting or domination, but on perseverance, unity, and ethical action. This was the final proof that arrogance can be challenged, superiority can be questioned, and ordinary people, when united, can achieve the extraordinary. The story ends on a hopeful note. Humanity had proven itself resilient, innovative, and capable of great things. Communities were stronger, people were more connected, and lessons about courage, cooperation, and ethical leadership would continue to guide future generations. The boastful group had learned that true power is not claimed. It is demonstrated through action, integrity, and collaboration. Humanity had shown what it truly feels like to be powerful, and the world would never forget it.